This is BBC One Scotland. Now the news at 10 o'clock with Huw Edwards, and reporting Scotland with Laura Goodwin.
Tonight at 10, more military aid for Ukraine as Britain agrees to supply hundreds of air defence missiles and drones. President Zelensky came to Chequers for talks with Rishi Sunak. Once again, he thanked the UK for supporting the struggle against Russia. But as more Ukrainian forces are being trained for combat, the case for air power is being made with increasing urgency.
Today we spoke about the jets, very important topic for us, because we can't control the sky, you know it.
It is not a straightforward thing, as Vladimir and I have been discussing, to build up that fighter combat aircraft capability.
Yes, we'll be looking at the challenges for Britain and other allies of supplying fighter jets to Ukraine. Also tonight, protesters disrupt a speech by the Home Secretary where she said it wasn't racist to want to control borders and to reduce immigration. We uncover a fraud where British men are paid to claim that they are fathers of children born to migrant women. The Rohingya Muslims, 6 years after they fled Myanmar, we meet a little boy who spent his life in a refugee camp. And once a rising star of digital news media valued at £5 billion, now Vice has filed for bankruptcy.
On Reporting Scotland, police are under investigation after they tasered an 11-year-old boy who had a knife. And a couple targeted by so-called paedophile hunters urged social media companies to remove posts containing unfounded allegations.
Good evening. The Ukrainian armed forces are to be supplied with hundreds of air defence missiles and drones by the United Kingdom. Now, this new supply is in addition to the allocation of cruise missiles, which was announced last week. And the news came on the day that President Zelensky was given a very warm welcome by Rishi Sunak to the Prime Minister's country residence of Chequers. Mr. Zelensky has said repeatedly that his forces need more weapons before they can launch their big counter-offensive against the Russians. Specifically, he wants the West to provide fighter jets. And Mr. Sunak said that that was not a straightforward thing to tackle. Our correspondent Caroline Hawley has the latest. Let's talk a little more then with our security correspondent Frank Gardner. Lots of smiles, lots of hugs going on today, Frank. But behind all of that, what did President Zelensky actually achieve? Frank, many thanks again. Frank Gardner there, our security correspondent. Let's move on to the day's other main story. There is no good reason why a shortage of lorry drivers, builders, welders, fruit pickers and others can't be solved by training more British workers instead of using foreign labour. That's the view of the Home Secretary, Suella Braverman. Next week, official figures are expected to show record migration figures, driven mostly by people coming from outside the EU to work and study here. Now, the Home Secretary said it wasn't racist in her view to want to control the UK's borders, but Labour said that after 13 years in power, Conservatives clearly were still failing to reduce net migration. Our political editor, Chris Mason, has more details. Chris, many thanks. Chris Mason there at Westminster. We'll stay with this story because ahead of those official migration figures, which are due next week, our Home Editor, Mark Easton, has been looking in more detail at the continuing impact of migration in the UK and how attitudes have been evolving. And Mark's here.
Thank you very much indeed. Well, Suella Braverman saying that Britain needs to get immigration down, referring to the pledge in the Conservatives' 2019 manifesto. A reminder of what they promised. 22% wanting it to increase. The arguments will continue, Huw.
Indeed, Mark. Thanks very much again. Mark Easton there, our Home Editor. Now, in Turkey, there will be a second round vote in the presidential election after President Erdogan narrowly failed to achieve more than half the popular vote at the weekend. The second round will be held on Sunday, the 28th of May. Mr. Erdogan is the clear favourite, given his lead of nearly 5% in that first round. He's been in power in Turkey as Prime Minister and President for 2 decades. He's extended his powers very significantly over that time. Let's talk to our senior international correspondent, Ola Gearin, who joins us now from Ankara. And Ola, in your view, how difficult is it going to be for the opposition to make up the gap in the first round? Ola, thanks very much for the latest analysis there in Ankara on the Turkish presidential election. Ola Gearin. A British pensioner accused of murdering his wife, who was seriously ill, has told a court in Cyprus that she'd begged him to help end her life. 74-year-old Janice Hunter, who had cancer, died in December 2021 at her home on the island. Her 75-year-old husband, David, says that her death was assisted suicide. Now, the Competition and Markets Authority is looking into whether a failure in competition has meant that customers have been overpaying for their groceries. And an investigation into the fuel market, which has already started, has found evidence that supermarkets have increased margins on petrol and diesel. So to talk about this, let's join our business correspondent, Emma Simpson. So very much the supermarkets here under the spotlight. OK, Emma, many thanks once again. Emma Simpson there, our business correspondent. Now, a BBC investigation has uncovered a complex scam where British men are paid to claim that they are the fathers of children born to migrant women. The fraud involves British men claiming paternity so that the child can get UK citizenship, and the migrant mother also has a route to stay in the country. The investigation found some men are being offered up to £10,000 in cash, with the illegal practice advertised openly on parts of social media. Our correspondent Divya Talwar has the story. And you can watch that full report on Newsnight. That's tonight on BBC Two at 10:30. In Bangladesh, the plight of Rohingya refugees living in the world's largest refugee camp is again the focus of deep concern. Nearly 1 million people are living there in desperate conditions, and the Prime Minister is warning that Bangladesh can no longer deal with the scale of the problem and is calling on the international community to share the burden. The Rohingya Muslims are an ethnic minority group from neighbouring Myanmar, which is predominantly Buddhist. Now, in August of 2017, action by the army of Myanmar led to hundreds of thousands of Rohingya Muslims fleeing to Bangladesh, forming camps around the port of Cox's Bazar. At the time, we reported on the families who'd become refugees overnight. They included Anwar, who was a newborn baby. This month, our South Asia correspondent, Rajini Vaidyanathan, and her team went to look for Anwar to find out what's happened to him. The owner of the news website Vice, once a rising star of digital media, has filed for bankruptcy. Vice Media Group was once valued at nearly £5 billion, but it has struggled to make a profit in recent years. Our culture correspondent, Stefan Powell, has more details. Tonight's football then, and Leicester City, the club responsible for one of the most uplifting achievements in the game when they won the Premier League 7 years ago, are now in a desperate struggle to avoid relegation, and tonight they were up against the resurgent Liverpool. My colleague Joe Wilson was watching. Time is just about 10:30, time to look at the weather. Here's Stav. Hi, Stav.
Hi there, Huw. Thank you very much. Good evening to you. Not a bad day, really, all in all. A nice start to the week after quite a chilly morning. The rest of this week looks largely dry because high pressure is going to continue to dominate. Take care, Huw.
OK, Stav, many thanks once again. And that is BBC News at 10 on the 15th of May. There's more analysis coming up of the day's main stories. As you probably know, it's on Newsnight, and that's with Victoria tonight, just about getting underway. Just preparing to go on air on BBC Two. Here on BBC One, well, all of our colleagues in the nations and regions standing by with the news where you are. But from all of us on the 10 team, it's thanks for watching and good night.
Good evening. An investigation is underway after police tasered an 11-year-old boy who was armed with a knife. The incident happened at the Craig Tara Caravan Park near Ayr earlier this year. Footage shows officers asking the boy to put the weapon down before one of them fires the 50,000-volt stun gun. Here's our Home Affairs correspondent, David Cowan. A woman who was driven from her Dumbarton home after her partner was targeted by paedophile hunters is calling on social media companies to remove posts making unfounded accusations. Shona McLean said the incident, in which their home was surrounded by people, resulted from an allegation made in a social media post. That post has now been removed from Facebook. Katrina Renton reports. Hundreds of students who've come to Scotland as migrants will be eligible for free tuition in the future. The Scottish Government has said it will widen eligibility following a landmark legal ruling. Lawyers successfully argued that Iraq-born Ola Jassim, who has lived in Scotland since she was 11, had her human rights breached. She'd been unable to get free tuition because she was 2 months short of the length of residency required. It will now be available both to students who have lived in the UK for 3 years and have been granted leave to remain, and some asylum-seeking children. A 13-year-old boy has died in hospital after being hit by a car in Glasgow. Artian Lukashaku was struck by a red Toyota Aygo in Balmore Road at around 6 o'clock last Wednesday evening. He was taken to the Royal Hospital for Children. Police say he died yesterday. An investigation is ongoing. Any witnesses are being urged to come forward. A fisherman escaped to a life raft after his boat caught fire off the Aberdeenshire coast. 2 lifeboats and a Coast Guard helicopter were sent to the scene near Stonehaven after the alarm was raised just before 3 o'clock this afternoon. The fisherman was uninjured. Football, and Owen Coyle has stepped down as manager of Queen's Park. The 56-year-old, who led the club to a championship promotion last season, says he leaves with a heavy heart. The Glasgow side lost 8-3 to Partick Thistle in the playoffs last week, having missed out on the chance of automatic promotion to the top flight the week before. Right, time now for the weather forecast with Christopher.
Hi Laura, thanks very much indeed. Pretty decent start to the week today, with some sunshine, some showers. More of the same tomorrow. Temperatures by mid-afternoon, the mid-teens. That's the forecast for now. Laura.
Thank you, Christopher. And that is where we leave you tonight. Our next update is here on BBC One Scotland at 6:25 tomorrow morning. But from everyone on the late team, have a very good night.
Here's the thing. I need